To see individuals joining us. So welcome to all of you. And we'll give it a few more minutes before we officially start. See individuals joining us. So welcome to all. I hear myself.
Can you hear yourself? Yep. Sorry,
Yes.
Lori. Hold on. Let me mute it.
That's always a shock to hear your voice because it doesn't sound the same as it does when you hear a recording. So
yeah, we have about a 30-second lag, and I usually remember to mute before I go live, but I kind of spaced it today. So
welcome, Matt, and others who are starting to join us. Amanda, I think I saw you join us. So going to make sure that Sharon joins us as well. Sharon, if you've joined us, would you let us know?
You'll do better if you sit on that end closer to the screen.
Okay.
Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Randy.
Yeah, I don't see Sharon Heffley yet. Are you having a viewing party, Randall?
Yes, we're in the boardroom here at the telephone company and got CRA board members here with us.
Perfect.
And the mayor of Benkelman and his lovely wife, Sharon.
Okay. Okay.
They're on the other side of the camera.
Okay. And you're broadcasting to a TV, I take it?
Yes, up on the wall there. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So we are getting quite a few people joining us. So we will let that continue. So if you got rain this morning, maybe raise your hand or open your microphone and tell us. We are so desperately. Randall says yes.
A tenth of an inch?
Yeah. High for the year.
Yeah, we got an inch according to Sherry. So I'll take that. So
In Benkelman, Nebraska, the first one that predicts is no chance. Everybody else will beat him.
okay.
Gauge wise.
My brother-in-law took his boat to Calamus yesterday and brought it right back home. He couldn't get it in.
Oh no.
It's that low up there. So if anybody's in the Burwell area joining us today, maybe you can give us an update.
Well, the river at Grand Island on the interstate still appears to be very dry.
Oh, yes. I don't know that I've ever seen it that dry.
No, and there's one interstate lake on the north side in there by Wood River or somewhere. I've never seen that so dry. It's not bone dry, but boy.
Was it Mormon Island is starting to look like it has islands in it when I drove by it last week. And that's never been that low. So yeah. Sarah says, unfortunately, no rain in Neely. So we definitely need to be thinking about our farmers and such. So we have just another minute or two, and then I want to get started. So I will let a few more join us. The beauty of virtual, you can join at the last minute, so and still be on time. So
This will be recorded. The others can
yes. We
Good.
do record. Well, we record it on YouTube, and then it's also posted to our HomeNE website, and we'll give you that contact information or that website at the conclusion today. So you can
Good.
go back and view it as often as you wish on either site. So yeah. So
Good.
yeah. So yeah, so just be sure and let us know if you're having any difficulty hearing us. It is 2:00, and I do want to honor everybody's time and get us started today. I do want to thank the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for their financial investment and support of the HomeNE Learning Network. And a reminder to all of you in attendance, we are streaming this on our YouTube channel to give attendees not one, but two options to watch today's webinar. We have over 100 registrations for today, and I'm really excited about that number. And so if you have difficulties here on Zoom, feel free to check it out on our YouTube channel as well. So let me just say welcome and good afternoon to all of you. My name is Lori Ferguson, and I'm with South Central Economic Development District here in Holdridge. And thank you for joining us today. You could be many places doing many things, but you are here, and we thank you for that. You are contributing to the growth of HomeNE. As I mentioned just previously, we have over 100 registrations for today. And in addition to that, at least 21 first-time participants. And so we always see some new participants, but that is a great number. So thank you for your interest in the topic and hearing Katie speak. So whether this is your first webinar or one of many, it's our goal that your organization or your community sees housing success as a result of your participation in HomeNE and the opportunities that it provides. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Katie Billings. I have enjoyed getting to know Katie over the last week or two. She is a city council member and the chairperson of the Community Redevelopment Authority in Auburn, Nebraska. She has a great story. She's energetic and enthusiastic, and I'm looking forward to her presentation today. Just as a side note, Katie does have to have a hard stop today at 3 o'clock due to a previous commitment. But until that time, she has made herself available to all of us. She welcomes your input and the questions following her presentation. So before we begin today, we just want to know why so many of you are joining us today. What is it about today's topic that is of interest to you? So feel free to add your comments to that question in the chat box. So Sherry, if you go ahead and advance the slide. Okay. And then at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon, who is our Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District, to introduce Katie to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So nice to have so many of you joining us. I'm kind of excited that we're getting into fall. And so I want to welcome you to the September 2022 edition of HomeNE. I kind of like cooler evenings and cooler mornings. And of course, it brings our fall events. And so we'll say go team for Katie's event today. As you know, South Central Economic Development District is honored to be the lead agent for this learning network. And we are glad you're here. HomeNE is designed for people all across Nebraska to successfully address the local housing challenges, the various things going on in your communities. We know you're not all the same, but we hope you can apply what you learn. HomeNE's purpose is to provide opportunities to foster interaction, engagement, and skill building for individuals that are passionate about addressing the housing issues in their communities, and to provide or to empower and encourage those of you participating to apply what you learn through the different avenues available to you. Had the privilege this morning of talking to county elected officials about how they can be a catalyst in their community too. So it's an exciting time to be in rural Nebraska. Today, we're joined by Katie Billings. Katie was born and raised in Auburn, Nebraska. She's a graduate of Peru State College. Since graduation, she has lived in Auburn. She and her husband, John, have 3 daughters. Carolyn is a senior at UNL, Melody a freshman at UNO, and Kristen a high school sophomore. Katie teaches group fitness classes and has managed the Auburn Wellness Center for almost 10 years. In her spare time, she likes to run, read books, and be outside. Katie's interest in local politics started early in life as she watched various family members become public servants. Her grandmother, Annie, served as the mayor of Auburn for 8 years and also served on the council for 8 years. In fact, Katie replaced her grandmother in the 2nd Ward when Granny Annie decided not to run again. Granny Annie was also president of the League of Municipalities. Katie's father was the fire chief in Auburn for over 20 years, and these examples helped Katie develop a keen sense of what it meant to be a public servant. She's currently finishing her 3rd term on the city council and will begin her 4th term in December. During her first council term, she was appointed to the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Authority, and she has served as chairperson of that organization for almost 8 years. She's involved in the Auburn Development Council, Nemaha County Health Services Board, Auburn High School Sports Boosters, and Friends of the Library. And Katie, I am so pleased that you said yes to be able to come, and it worked out today. So welcome to our HomeNE network.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you that have joined today. As mentioned, just in my brief bio there, been a resident, born in the hospital in Auburn, and really, except for a small little stint at UNL for a semester, I've lived in Auburn for going on a little over 41 years now. So I think that kind of is a testament to the what Auburn is, just a wonderful place to grow up, to raise your kids, to raise young families. We have a wonderful school system. For those of you that aren't really familiar with Auburn, Auburn is a town of about 3,400. So I would say, like a lot of smaller communities, we're a city of the second class. Over the years, our population has fluctuated, but basically stayed pretty close to about that 34 to 3,500 range. We are about an hour south of Omaha and Lincoln, and we're about 90 minutes north of the Kansas City airport area. So right in the southeast corner of Nebraska, which is nice. Easily we can access Kansas, Missouri, Iowa. We sit right along that way. Our main business district sits at the intersection of two major highways, Highway 75 and Highway 136. So really, as you would probably imagine, truck traffic and just traffic in general, our Highway 75 stays pretty darn busy, as well as Highway 136. Again, Auburn is a wonderful place to raise a family. We have a wonderful hospital, a county hospital, a county-owned hospital. We are a Class C1 school. So really, probably, I think we don't really get out too much west. I think probably where I've been out there to participate, of course, in like sporting events, is I've been to the Hastings area, familiar with that, Kearney, Grand Island, did go to Superior for a basketball game once, but to be honest, I've never been to Holdridge, and some of these places that other people are on today, that where they're from, I've probably honestly never been to. So good to see you all. Again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to our discussion today. So I'm going to just start a little bit with, I kind of have a unique situation because I'm on the city council, but also serve as the chairperson for the Community Redevelopment Authority. So I can give you information as far as housing is concerned from both of those angles today. But what I wanted to start with is, I would imagine something that's very familiar to most of you that have joined in today, is housing. And we always we've talked in Auburn at development meetings, at CRA meetings, at city council meetings, at committee meetings. Really, one of the largest problems affecting our community is the lack of housing, in particular workforce housing. We in Auburn, we do have a young population, but we also have an aging population. So it seems for us, and I would be interested to know if it's the same for a lot of you, we have quite a gap between what we'd call kind of rental housing and then this nice big gap, those houses that people rent, maybe houses that would sell on the market right now for anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 to $60,000, a lot of that. And then there's this big gap. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got some housing developments where we've got houses, $200,000 to $400,000, $450,000. So for us, the struggle has been to find that midsection, that good workforce housing, what we call, where people, a 2-income family that is coming in and is looking for a house anywhere from the $90,000 to the $150,000 range. We don't have a lot of that. When we do have that, when we do have those types of houses for sale, those are eaten up pretty quickly. So almost created a little bit of this vacuum between those two types of housing. And because of the age of a lot of the houses in Auburn and the dilapidation of those houses, and the fact that many of those houses have become so dilapidated that they end up in the nuisance status. What typically happens with those houses is the powers that be, the ordinance committee, the city attorney, they determine that those houses are at a nuisance status. They give property owners, whether it's a landlord or it's owner occupied house, a list of things that those property owners need to do to get off that nuisance status. I will tell you that probably about 70 to 80% of the time, maybe even inching upward towards the 85 to 90% of the time, those requirements do not get taken care of. So then what happens? A citation is written. What happens after that? Still nobody takes care of it. Fast forward to a year, 18 months later, those houses, those owners say, I'm not going to mess with this. Here you go, city. You go ahead and take over the house. All right. So then what does the city have to do? The city has to pay to tear that house down, whether it's have somebody come in and, literally tear that house down, or our local volunteer fire department burn that house down. So we pay for that. We pay for any inspection of asbestos, any of that. And then we pay for the removal with our labor and anyone to haul off the mess. We clean up the lot. And now here we have these vacant lots sitting here that the city owns, which is okay for a while, right? But then that's also the city having to pay to maintain it. And we're very much interested in not owning those lots as a city. We'd like to do what we can to get those properties back on the tax roll. What we run into is oftentimes those lots are not buildable lots for workforce type housing, right? Maybe you could put a house there, but also another problem, maybe you don't like the two houses that are sitting next to you. Maybe those two houses are in the same exact dilapidated state that the house on that vacant lot once was as well. So, we've done some things as a CRA in the last couple of years with TIF to try to incentivize those properties specifically. So what we did specifically, and just kind of as a side note, we in Auburn have had TIF. We've been participating in TIF for almost 23 years now. So when our 15 years was up from when we first started TIF, we took a hard look at our policies and procedures. What did we want to implement in our new policies and procedures that could help us spur some of this development as far as nuisance housing, vacant lots, that type of thing is concerned? So when we were redoing our policies and procedures to restart, we asked JEO when they were conducting our new blight and substandard study. We mapped out an area, bordered an area where a significant amount of those dilapidated houses on the nuisance list, where those houses were. So in turn, when we started our new core redevelopment area, that area includes a lot of those houses. Okay. So in our policies and procedures, we implemented where owners of those properties could come apply for up to $50,000 in grant money to help, in essence, flip those properties. Because what we were seeing is renters, or excuse me, landlords and contractors apprehensive to flip these houses because they needed some help with it, right? They didn't want to finance it completely on their own. So we said, okay, owners, we will let you apply for up to $50,000 to help you flip these houses. Now, there are some caveats with that, right? And if you're interested into those, I won't dig into those caveats and kind of those requirements. But really, it's a fairly quick process. You know, it's just like any other TIF project that someone would apply for in our community, whether that's a bucket TIF project or a standalone TIF project. We'd utilize both, by the way. We have bucket TIF and we also use TIF for standalone projects in Auburn. The $50,000 in the nuisance housing, that does come from our bucket TIF in our core redevelopment area. So have we been successful? Somewhat. I'll give you a little bit of a success story. We had a 2-story apartment building right on Central Avenue in Auburn. Central Avenue is Highway 136, so that runs east and west through Auburn. And a developer, this property had sat vacant for a long time, probably about 10 to 12 years ago. It was still actively had apartments in it. Been through a shift of many different owners, finally just was not suitable for people to live in. So sat vacant for a good 5-6 years. And as you can imagine, when a property sits vacant for 5 to 6 years, things go wrong. All the windows were busted out. It had been pretty much cleaned down to the shell. So fast forward to about 2 years ago, we had a property developer from kind of the Omaha and Papillion area reach out to us, very much interested in this building. It's a historic building. It's brick. It sits right along the highway. Very cool building. So these developers bought the building, and they were actually one of the first ones that came and applied for the $50,000 TIF from our bucket to utilize for their property. So went through the application process. They were awarded the $50,000. They used that $50,000 for things. They replaced all the windows. They put all new windows in the building. They put a new door. They put all new security lighting on the outside. Basically got the outside shored up so the elements wouldn't get in anymore. Some safety and security to it so that people wouldn't break in and vandalize it anymore. And currently they are just kind of in the process of working through the financing of how do we make this a livable space with some apartments for workforce housing. They were actually awarded a rural workforce housing grant to help them with their project as well. So there's one of our success stories. Now, has our program worked for us like we anticipated? To be honest, it hasn't. And that's why we are kind of spinning our wheels here, shifting our focus a little bit. And I think the reason that it hasn't been ultimately successful is because in these types of houses, and again, maybe you can agree with this or maybe what you see, you really don't have property owners with a lot of initiative or the funds to fix their houses, to bring them up out of that nuisance status. So that has prohibited us from having, to be honest, a lot of applicants decide to take part in this. Same goes for contractors, because a lot of these houses are, if they are rental houses, we don't have a lot of motivated landlords to take part in it because it takes money on top of the $50,000 that you're just getting granted. A lot of these houses too are hung up in probate. So a contractor might be interested in a house, but can't own it because of its probate status. So that's where we are on that. So we've just had talks recently over the past year in CRA about kind of revamping that part of our policies and procedures. How do we get people to maybe bite on this incentive, this $50,000 incentive, just a little bit more? How do we get people to get some initiative? We've also had discussions as a community redevelopment authority of buying some of the vacant lots ourselves. Community redevelopment authorities can own property. So we've had talks, and maybe some of your other boards, I know there was one CRA board on here, maybe you've kind of had those talks as well. Currently, we are in talks with a housing developer. We have a property that really kind of sits in the thick of our town, a little right by our school, by our hospital. And that housing developer has reached out to us and has basically said, okay, I'm familiar with TIF. I've done these types of projects before. How can TIF work for me? How can I utilize TIF? And we're very much interested in that. We told the developer, TIF can help you with things in this housing development, the paving of streets, getting utilities, whether that's electric, sewer, water, gas, fiber, getting those utilities to your housing development. TIF can help pay for, putting fire hydrants, lots of different things that TIF can help with in those housing developments. So that's chugging right along. That's nothing official yet, but we just had our community redevelopment authority meeting this last Tuesday, and we talked about that, getting updates on it. Basically, where we're at is, the property is almost in the hands of the housing developer, and from then we are very much excited to work with them and see how we can help them out with TIF. We also have 2 trailer parks, I guess is what I'll call them, mobile home parks. One of those mobile home parks is in a blight and substandard area, so would be eligible for some TIF. Another one is not, but there is a new owner of those 2 mobile home parks that has reached out to us that is also very much interested in TIF for updating some sewer to those mobile homes, getting the streets paved to those mobile home communities. So we very much have people interested in what we've got going on TIF. But as some of you who have TIF in your communities may well know, it takes a lot more than just TIF for these people to develop their projects and for their projects to fully come into fruition. So those are kind of the things we have going on as far as TIF is concerned with housing. Does anybody have, I'm sort of monitoring the chat box here, but I don't exactly know for sure. Are there any questions in the chat box, or I'll kind of just take a pause for a brief moment to see if anyone has any questions about what I've talked about so far as TIF and housing development.
Katie, Jessica did have a question. She wanted to know if you would be willing to give the basic framework of your procedures. Her community, Burwell, is going through a very similar process, and they'd like to have maybe some examples to build their own process from. So
okay.
I don't know if she meant for you to share that later, or if she wanted you to talk about that right now.
I can go ahead and talk about it if that's good for the rest of the group. Maybe some other of you that are working on the same thing, or maybe those of you that have TIF and do have your policies and procedures, maybe it'll kind of be interesting to see how ours might be the same or different than yours. So when we did a standalone project about 4 years ago or so, we got the help of David Levy. And I think some of you are familiar with David Levy. David works at Baird Home in Omaha, and they are just pretty much I feel like the authority on TIF law in Nebraska. So David worked with us on a project, which led us as the CRA to retain their services to be our attorney for our community redevelopment group, our community redevelopment authority. And it was actually very good timing. So our Community Redevelopment Authority attorney is Michael Sands from Baird Home. And about the time that Michael joined our group was when our first 15 years, when our 15 years on our TIF was up and we were getting ready to reinitiate it. And so at that time, we took a look at our policies and procedures. 2 members from our CRA committee, we brainstormed as a committee about, okay, what do we want to change in our policies and procedures? What type of projects are we interested in supporting in our community as a CRA? And we brainstormed as a group. And then 2 people from our committee kind of met as a subcommittee with Michael from Baird Home. And they said, okay, Michael, we want to keep our bucket TIF. We want to still do these types of bucket TIF projects downtown for windows, doors, lighting, sidewalk, infrastructure. But we'd also like to implement this nuisance housing program. We'd like to do that. So we took all of our ideas. The subcommittee then took those ideas, met with Michael, and Michael really developed the policies and procedures for us. I'll tell you, just kind of as a side note here, anyone who is working through the process of either developing their policies and procedures for their group or revamping their policies and procedures for their group, I strongly encourage you to work with an attorney that is very familiar with TIF. You know, I think we all know that TIF can be a touchy subject. I really feel like it's an often misunderstood mechanism of financing and mechanism of funding. I often hear many times around town, well, I got this TIF on my tax statement. Why am I paying another tax? Why am I paying another tax? And I say, well, you're not paying another tax. Let me try to explain it to you. And when I do explain it to people, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. But just kind of circling back around, I don't know if many of you paid attention, about 3 or 4 years ago, the community development law in the legislature was majorly revamped and really tightened up because of the powers that be here and there in the cities that said, whoa, 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 like this is kind of just a free for all with this TIF. We'd like to see some more regulations. So we were really lucky at that time that we got in touch with Michael, because actually Baird Home gave a presentation about all the changes to the community development law. Try to make this long story short, we are very much pleased with Michael and our work with Baird Home. They keep us on the up and up, because to be honest, I mean, we're so many of us on the board, you know, we can study the community development law, but it's nice to have an attorney that is really honed in on community development law and real estate law to make sure that when we do develop our policies and procedures, that we are doing it just 100% to the book, and make sure that we're taking into mind all aspects of the community development law. So I would say when we were developing our policies and procedures, we absolutely took all the advice that we could from our attorney, and that's an attorney who really just knows very much about the community development law. Hopefully, maybe that answers your question a little bit.
Thank you, Katie. There are a couple more questions, but I don't know where you are in time for your presentation, so we can.
No, I'm good. I can answer. I see one down here maybe that says,
Sure.
Is this about the definition of bucket versus standalone TIF?
Yes, that is one of
Yeah.
the questions. And then we also have a question about the grant process you outlined. Is that taxable to the recipient?
Okay. All right. So I think the best way to explain the difference between bucket TIF and standalone TIF, bucket is like what it sounds like. In your areas that are blight and substandard, and have been collecting that gap in a redevelopment area, right? You start here And then for your 15 years, you collect that gap in the property assessment value. And that gap, right, those dollars when they come in, that gap in funding, that goes over into that TIF bucket that people, businesses, people can draw out of to do projects, right? So in that bucket, there are funds there. Over the 15 years in that development area, those funds have been drawing into that bucket, going into that bucket. So someone comes to us from downtown and says, hey, I'd like to do some tuck pointing on my building. Okay, you're eligible from bucket TIF. You're going to apply for your bucket TIF, and then we have those funds. The CRA has those funds already in that bucket, in that banking account, and we can draw from those funds to help fund your project. Now, standalone TIF is different. A standalone project is a much bigger project. A standalone project starts with no TIF. The objective of a standalone project is that someone has a project, okay, and they've met with their, the assessor in their community, and they are saying, okay, I'm starting the project right here, right? And I'll just use numbers, just throw out numbers. It's $100,000 right now. The property is assessed at $100,000. I'm going to put a new Family Dollar on that property, which is one that we're working through in Auburn right now. And when I get done building this Family Dollar, my property is going to be assessed at this value, right? So there's the original assessment. Over the 15 years, my property, I'm hoping that will assess to this value. So there's that gap right there in the funding, okay? So those people, those developers come to us and they say, hey, I've got this project. I need TIF to help me out, okay? And I've got A, B, and C that are eligible for TIF. I'm going to pave my parking lot. I'm going to do some dirt work. I'm going to connect, I've got some things that I need help with as far as sewer, electricity, and water are concerned, okay? So what happens then, right? The developer, they take out a loan that is TIF backed, okay? It's backed by those TIF funds that are supposed to come in, right? So as those monies come in, as the value of that property rises over the 15 years, you take your base assessment, right? The property value rises, you take that gap, that goes in to help that developer, right? Pay back that TIF backed loan, if that makes any sense. In the simplest forms, bucket TIF projects start with money in the bucket. Standalone projects do not start with TIF, right? They anticipate the growth in the value of the property to get that TIF. Hopefully that makes sense.
And then the question about, is the grant process taxable to a recipient?
Is the grant process taxable?
You mentioned the $50,000 grant that might be made available to an individual or a developer.
Yes.
I think that's the direction of that question. Do they have to pay taxes on that grant?
Gosh, I honestly cannot answer that question. That is one that I cannot answer because, once that $50,000 is granted to them, we kind of step out of the process as a CRA. So I'm sorry, but I do not know the answer to that question.
Probably an accounting question or yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's a source of funding, so I would imagine it is, but honestly, I cannot answer that question.
We have one more question. I can share it with you or wait until your presentation is done. How do you?
Well, I guess I just wanted to touch base real quick, and then we can go back to your question if that's okay. I kind of talked a long time there for how we use TIF to address housing in our community. I just wanted to briefly mention some of the programs that we also do through the city side. So in our city budget, which we passed on Monday night, thank goodness, it's always good when you get your city budget passed, we allocate local dollars for some housing things, ones that might interest you. We offer a $10,000, 5 every year, of a $10,000 infill housing grant, okay? So someone wants to build a house, Okay, they come to the city with their plans. They can apply for up to $10,000 in an infill housing grant. All right, so that's a vacant property where no house is, and it's going to be infill housing. Those are pretty popular in our community. Honestly, those get eaten up pretty quick. I will say they've slowed down just a bit, kind of because of the slow in construction right now with the cost and shipping issues and all that. But really, to be honest, every year those $5,000, $10,000 infill housing grants get eaten up pretty quickly. Another thing that we do is we offer a dilapidated housing grant program. And what that does is owner occupied houses, those property owners can come to us and kind of give us a laundry list of projects that they want to do. Some things are eligible, some things aren't. Those property owners are eligible for up to 30% of their total project cost to $10,000. So 30% up to $10,000 of their total project cost. We have a lot of landlords participate in those, but we also have a lot of owner occupied people that participate in that program as well. And just like probably most of you, we are always working on grants. We were just awarded a $530,000 housing grant to where our city is going to be able to build a couple of houses. So we're excited about that. We are always applying for downtown revitalization funds, everything like that. So really, we've got all these programs available. We got kind of a smorgasbord of programs available. It's just getting people to get interested in those programs. So we can go ahead and go back to your question. Then someone had another question.
Sure. So Jonathan had a question for you. If you could just talk about what it would take for a community that doesn't utilize TIF now to implement a program and use it for new housing development.
Right. So again, that's kind of like way past my time. Like I said, we've had TIF in Auburn now for almost 23 years. And actually, when it did get started, it was when my grandmother that I mentioned in my biography, when she was the mayor, it does have to go to a vote of your citizens to get it started. So you do have to start that way. It's not quick. Like I said, TIF is sometimes very misunderstood. And so it is a process. Once you have voter approval, then it's locked in. You can utilize it and you don't have to go like when our initial 15 years was up and we wanted to reinitiate our core redevelopment area and start to do some new things. At that time, we did not have to go to a vote of the public. Now you still have to jump through all the hopes of your planning commission. They have to approve everything. And then your city council, they have to approve everything. But to get it started initially, you do have to have a vote of your community.
Okay, so what questions are coming to mind for Katie? Katie, could you just expand or for me personally, the city budget allows for this grant funding for the dilapidated houses and the infill housing grants, correct? That's not a special grant, that's just within your city budget.
No, right. We allocate, let's see, in last year's city budget, and I think it's the same this year, we allocated $200,000 in in our general fund, $200,000 in our general fund. Now, I also will say that $200,000 in that line item, that also takes care of those times, like I mentioned before, when we incur costs to tear properties down or burn properties down, that money is in there. But that's a small amount of the money. So yeah, $200,000 in our general fund in our city budget for people to come to apply for those funds. And then again, we top those funds off with things that we apply for, DTR and such. Yep.
Okay. And do you have LB 840 in the community?
We do not have LB 840. We have talked about the need for LB 840. They tried 2 times on LB 840. And this was over 10 years ago, 2 times on LB 840. The tax passed, but the plan did not, which is kind of mind boggling to me. People were okay with the tax, but they didn't like the plan. So that's been a discussion for quite some time is what we can do. And, LB 840 kind of I feel like went through the same process that TIF did a couple of years ago. It got tightened up on in the legislature. You know, it used to be that you could use LB 840 to build a community center. You can't really do that anymore. You have to use LB 840 to implement a program. But we are very much interested in we just kind of keep exploring LB 840 and how do we sell it to the voters, I guess, in essence.
Okay. Sean wanted to know if you could share the logistics, or I assume guidelines for your dilapidated grant program with us, or how those might be. Made
Absolutely.
available.
I can certainly come up with that literature and those things like that. And I can email those to anybody that would like. I can probably just share them with you in email. And I believe also at the end, I think my email is going to be available if anyone would like to email me with any of those questions. But yeah, I can certainly make those logistics available to you.
Right. For those of you who may be new, we do make slides available usually after a webinar, and we can make any documents that Katie makes available to us, to the registered individuals as well. So we will get that out to you all. So what other questions do you have coming to mind for Katie? We've even got some people from out of state joining us today who are interested in the topic. So yeah, please open your microphones and share those with Katie.
This is Mike. I'd be interested in you sharing a little bit more about some of those barriers that are preventing people from taking advantage of the program, the TIF dollars as they're set up right now. What is it that you think really needs to be changed? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing that needs to be changed is our program right now currently relies on the initiative of either the owner of the nuisance property or the landlord of the nuisance property. So those owners, those landlords, they are not taking the initiative right now because either A, they don't care, they're getting their rent money and they don't care, or B, they don't have the funds to do it. So what we've talked about as the Community Redevelopment Authority, when we go to review our policies and procedures and maybe revamp them just a little bit, is actually taking the initiative ourselves as a Community Redevelopment Authority. Like I mentioned, maybe taking some of those vacant lots and going, you know what, as a Community Redevelopment Authority, we're going to buy this lot. And then we're going to put just this basic house on it. We're not worried about paint, wallpaper, any of that. We don't want to do any of this, but we're going to then maybe kind of have an agreement with a local contractor. And we're going to say, hey, we'll put this here. And afterwards, you're going to get it with the fact in mind that you are going to finish this house. And within the next 18 months, you are going to sell this house. So we've decided as a CRA that probably we're going to have to start taking the initiative on these nuisance houses and these vacant lots because the property owners are not.
My
Katie,
question,
sorry. Go ahead.
My question from earlier about laying out the framework of your plan, I was meaning specifically to the nuisance plan of what that looks like when you notify the homeowner, what your list of nuisance things look like. We are redoing our comprehensive plan and ordinances, and ours are very vague. Mm-hmm. So with our new city planner, I was wondering if you would lay out the framework of how you go through determining nuisance property and what your process is on that.
Right. So we have an ordinance committee, and the ordinance committee is a subcommittee of a couple of city council members, the building inspector, the city attorney, and our city administrator / economic developer. So what happens is that group meets probably once every month, maybe once every 2 months or so if they get busy. And really what that is that's the building inspector and the city attorney and the city council people kind of brainstorming and going over potential houses in town. Like, hey, I was driving around and I saw this house probably needs to be on the nuisance list. Or, hey, the sheriff's office has received several complaints about the condition of this house. Okay. So they gather all those kind of brainstorm on that information. And then really it's just a delegation. The city attorney then draws up, right, the proper legal paperwork, that legal paperwork comes to the city council. Of course, the owner gets, before the owner is ever put on the nuisance list, before their property is put on the nuisance list, this owner does have plenty of time to address the issue. City attorney and or building inspector send out a letter that says you need to fix A, B, C, D, E, or you could potentially be put on the nuisance list. So we do that. If it doesn't get taken care of, then there's that nuisance delegation that rolls through the city council. And then it kind of usually honestly just keeps rolling through there. Don't take care. You've got 6 months, you've got 6 months to clean up, to address the nuisances that how you've been told, and then you'll be removed from nuisance status. If they aren't removed from nuisance status, then eventually it works its way to the city taking over the property. Does that help?
Yes, that's kind of where we are on a couple of properties where we have gone through that process. Now we have cleaned them up multiple times. And so then those costs get assessed against the property, and there's still, so I would say the next step to that process of the city actually taking over the property is maybe where we're at that kind of brink, but we don't have a great process lined out of what that looks like.
Right.
And so I'm the economic development director. I would personally like to just go in and offer to purchase the property and then have the city forgive the cost that they have put into it. And we are all in agreement of that, but we don't have a good approach of how to get that to the owners of the properties that are already a little frustrated that the city came in and cleaned up the property and then billed them for it. They have no way to pay, but also they had that huge time frame of the ability to do those things themselves, and they chose not to. So just we're kind of stuck a little bit in that we have expended a lot of costs to clean up properties, and now we're ready for that next step, but we don't have a good framework of what that looks like.
Yeah, I would really say it's such a catch-22 because you want to get the properties cleaned up, but at the same time, you don't want to own these properties as a city. You want to get them back on the tax rolls. We even as a city have given away free lots, with the intention and the agreement that the people that we give away these lots to will build a, $90,000 workforce level income house within 18 months or so. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying there. It's a catch-22 process. It really is.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you. What other questions do you have for Katie today? Or comments? Maybe something you've heard her talk about and you've never thought of it that way, or something you might be willing to try in your community.
I wouldn't mind actually maybe clarifying my question as well, kind of in the same way that Jessica did. You offered the hypothetical of what it would look like if somebody wanted to build a Dollar General, but again, going back to that housing development idea, like let's say the community has TIF already, it sounds like that would be standalone. So can you just give a hypothetical along the same lines? I definitely don't have very much experience with the program. I'm almost certain everybody on the call has more than I do, so I don't want to take up necessary time, but just in a really rudimentary way.
I think this is how the process would look as far as a standalone project for a housing development. Okay. So let's say you had a potential housing developer come to you, and this housing developer would really have to have quite a few of his ducks in a row. We need to see your phases. What types of houses are you going to build? How much are you going to cost people, or how much are you going to sell these houses for? And then what does your long-term plan look like? Are you just going to build 15 houses and then you're out of here? Or is your plan to build these initial 15 houses and then over the next 20 years, add 20 more houses to that mix? That developer also has to come with information of, for us to ascertain, how does this project affect our city services? Can our water lines handle it, right? Do we have the electricity to do it? Do we have the gas lines to those places? So we have to know all these factors in advance. Really, a lot of ducks have to line up in a row. And then this housing developer says, so I've got all this done. I've got all these phases. I'm showing you all what I want to do. This is my master plan, but I need TIF to help me, because like a A housing developer's probably going to, if a housing developer comes in and he has to pave his streets and he has to get water and sewer and electricity to his houses, right? He's going to charge those property owners an assessment probably, right? When they buy the lot, or excuse me, when they buy the house, there's going to be an assessment on that for his cost. So how TIF helps in that situation is the things that the types of costs that are TIF eligible to that potential developer, the streets, the water, the sewer, the lighting, the curbs, the gutters, all those things like that. Then the housing developer can say, hey, if I can have some TIF help with this, this helps me offset my cost just a little bit. It's a mechanism that I can use so that I can, in essence, really kind of sell these houses quicker, right? It's a funding mechanism available to me to help spur development and then eventually get those houses sold. Maybe that makes a little bit of sense. And if there's something specifically that I'm not tapping on, please just let me know and I'll try my best.
Can I touch on something that's just happened here in Cumming County in the last year concerning TIF? We have a 72-acre project just outside of Wisner, and the Wisner community decided to TIF that project. The property is actually owned by Wisner Community Development, but Wisner is going to do all the infrastructure, all the dirt work. Almost $3 million is going to go out to get that ready to build because it was just cropland. And I had a disagreement with one of my board of supervisors over this. He said, it's stupid to put everybody on the hook for those taxes. And I said, you're not actually doing that, because if you don't do something, you don't have any place for people to come. If you do something this way, then you're looking forward and trying to have, not only are there residential lots, there's also commercial lots. So that $3 million is going to be paid back in 15 years through TIF on the difference, and it's an evaluation or an assessed value difference. It's not on retail value by any means, but the difference between what cropland would have cost and what it costs assessed value wise. So it works, and Michael Sands is actually the one that did the stuff in Wisner. So having somebody like that knows what they're doing makes a huge difference.
David, thank you very much for sharing that story. All those things that you're hearing from your community, some of those things that you're hearing from the community are kind of the exact same things that we hear. We hear in Auburn, and I'm sure a lot of you, the rest of you here as well. You know, a lot of people, it seems to be kind of, there's a little bit of that thought, well, if this doesn't directly benefit me, then why should I pay for it? And it's like, well, hold up. It may not directly, benefit you, but indirectly, it's absolutely, it's going to. And I tell people when they come to me about like not liking TIF so much, but when I explain the things in our community that TIF has funded, they kind of go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can see it that way. So thank you, David. And I'm glad you know Michael, because Michael is great. Michael Sands is really amazing.
Okay. Good conversation. Thank you. We are approaching the time when Katie's going to have to depart. So as you're maybe thinking of one last question for her, we can go ahead and share her contact information, Sherry, if you would, please. She has made her contact information available to us. So if there is something else after today that you wanted to maybe check with her on, or ask her for a clarification, or run by her, her information is on this slide there for you. So Katie, I know you're going to be departing very soon, but I do want to just say thank you so very much for your time and presentation today. Informative. I think it's got a lot of us thinking, and thanks for being that shining star in the state of Nebraska and your willingness to be with us today. It's greatly appreciated. So, okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you everyone for hopping on. I know you all have I know you all have busy lives, so I appreciate you being here with us today. And thank you again for all of that. And yeah, I'm more than willing to continue the conversation with any of you, whether that's via email or a phone call or a text message conversation. More than willing to continue the conversation.
Okay, sounds great. As we begin to wrap up today, I just wanted to make you aware that today's webinar, as well as all of our past webinars, are available on our HomeNE.us website. It is a searchable website now, and so for this month, I kind of did a leadership search, and I think I came up with 9 different webinars that dealt with leadership. One that always fascinates me was breaking through the iceberg in your community, or icebergs in your community. I always find that fascinating, that systems thinking model. And so that was presented, I believe, in 2019. And a year or so ago, we had the city of Superior talk about taking the first step of doing nuisance abatement and where they are today. So check those webinars out, as well as Katie's, which will be available later on. So also just a reminder of next month's webinar. That will be on October 20th. It's the 3rd Thursday of every month except for December. And be watching your email for those information and details on that that webinar. So Katie, if you're still with us, thank you again. It's greatly appreciated. And if there are any other questions, comments from the group today? If not, then thank you for joining us, and I look forward to having you join us in October. Have a great day.